the being public, for me at least, has been incidental to that, or it's been a means rather than an end. I would like very happily I do some things in private, but I would very happily do all of it, in private if I could. But you can't really. Like, some of it has to be in public, in various ways. Like, it makes a difference whether you're like, if I give a lecture to 700 Germans, that's different than tweeting or having a conversation with my best friend in Berlin or whatever it might be. So, I mean, one reflection would be that being public is sometimes a means to an end, like that there's you're serving a communicative function in which, like, your body is somehow necessary, and so it's there. Charisma, you may have me boxed in there in a number of different ways, because so my definition of charisma here was the ability, it was entirely negative. It was the ability to, and what I had in mind was precisely, Odinic charisma, or like the ability to create a world in which somebody else's sacrifice is necessary for the sake of, my victory, my wealth, the continuity of my cults, whatever it might be. And so then if your question is, can there be such a positive definition of charisma? It's interesting. I mean, I'm borrowing, like, I didn't do this as a kind of intellectual history thing, like, but obviously I was thinking along with, and some of you probably recognize this, but I was going back to Weber and Durkheim and René Girard, like those are sort of they were my crew when I was thinking about this stuff. And so, charisma for Weber functions a bit the way that I was talking about. You need it until you get to that. You need it, like, when I hand out the rings, right? Like in ancient Kiev, archaeologists have literally found the gold rings that people would hand out, right? And that was not just it's not a monetary transaction, it's a charismatic transaction. Like, you belong to my retinue. After our triumph, I give you a ring. It's nice that you have it, but also it binds the two of us together. It's a charismatic interaction, and then then you get to a point where, in fact, you have contracts and you have institutions and so on, and that kind of interaction is no longer needed. That's Weber, and I'm kind of working with that. But in terms of positive charisma, that's a really good question you're asking me to reflect on. I mean, I think it's, I guess there's a charisma of making things make sense.
Social cohesion.
Yeah. I mean, there's like, this is all I'm going to say, because like I don't have strong thoughts about this and I don't want to take up all the time, but I think there's a charisma of making things make sense, and that charisma is largely absent. And like a joke, like, you guys were very polite and you laughed at my jokes, that was very nice. You laughed at that one too. Like a joke is one way of making sense. Like, I never obviously plan my jokes. You can tell, I'm sure, from but a joke is one way of making sense. It only is funny because of all the things that we just were experiencing together, right? Like, the things that were jokes in this talk, if I told them out of context, they would just be ridiculous. But because we've gone through the same process together, then they're funny. And so I think that things can be, like, more things can be made sense of than we think, and that there is a kind of charisma to that. I think it's like when people talk to me, like after I've been on TV, or when Ukrainians when Ukrainians walk up to me in Ukraine and say, "Oh, thanks for your lectures. Like, I now understand this." I think that has to do with that. It's like the charisma of making a kind of sense of things, and I think it's a charisma which is missing a bit, so like this whole public intellectual thing, like I have to say, like, I'm kind of allergic to the topic. Like, I kind of want to run away from it, just like I would really like to run away from being one. But that's like, I think it does have to do with like the physicality of making sense. The physicality of making sense. The presence of sense making, I think, is I'm sure it's not an entirely innocent form of charisma, but it's a different form of charisma.
There was a gentleman there I saw halfway through, yes.
Thank you. My name is Martin Sumer. I'm a research economist. I think, Timothy, how I understood your lecture is that you started by saying, if you look at the world today, political movements and some personalities like Putin, Trump, and Elon Musk, you talked then just about the personalities, we have a hard time explaining this by conventional arguments we are used to, interests, rationality, or something. And then you say, like, if we assume let's assume we take a pagan mindset and look at this phenomena, people again, suddenly things start to fall into place and make a lot of sense. But what you did not explain is, like, what is the mechanism that make this, pagan paradigms or behavior more prevalent, more plausible, or is this something new, or was this not there before, or what caused this transition? So I did not hear an answer in your reflections, like how we had this transition from something to this. Mm-hmm. And maybe you can say something about that.
Yeah. I was on the charisma question. My children say Riz, my children say Riz. It's like charisma has its own kind of internet avatar, which is Riz, as in like, Dad, I think you got the W Riz, which is like nicest thing my son's ever said to me. Yeah, no, quite right. I mean, that's more than I could do, but I think I suggested some things. There were some causal arrows here of things that have changed. Just to name two, like the things that the things that I was talking about are actually things which have changed over the last 30 years. So wealth concentration has changed dramatically in the last 30 years, especially in Russia and the United States and some other places. And I do think that their quantity does become quality. Like if the richest people in your country have $500 million, that's one thing. But when they have $200 billion, that's already a different thing. Like that's already wealth which exceeds that of many countries, and you think of, like, it's easier to think of them as gods at that point, because to hope for them to hope that they'll behave like gods, that they'll have favor upon you, right? That they will heed your sacrifice, at least the sacrifice of the 18 hours of your day that you spent in front of their platform, that they will, I think at that level, things change. At a certain point, they change. And for me, it does have to do with the accumulation of wealth, because it's not like, and it's a relationship, because it's not as though, it's not about how people are poorer. It's about the emergence it's about the fact that, I'm slightly making this up and you can all correct me, but roughly, half the wealth in my country is owned by people, like, it could be owned by you, it isn't, but like it's roughly this number of people in a couple more rooms, right? That's weird. And it means that those people are in fact in a different position than everyone else. They're in a different position than people have $1 million or $10 million. If you have $1 billion or $10 billion, you're in an objectively different position, and you're also you're in this level where there is no level above you. Like that's it. Like you're past the point where the money even makes sense, and so you're in this sort of ethereal plane where you're with other people, not really quite sure what to do, which is another aspect of this tragedy. Is that in general they have no idea what to do, and they're unhappier than middle class people, but. So that's part of it. And then tech is also the change in technology, right? So 30 years ago, we were not spending, Americans now spend 14 hours a day in front of, oh, no, sorry, I don't want to exaggerate. Americans now spend 9 hours a day in front of screens. That's a lot of time, right? That's a lot of time, more time than we sleep. And that didn't used to be true. Like sleep used to be number one, and now screen staring is number one. And that's a very different corporeality. It's a very different relationship. And I think like that itself justifies asking these big questions. So like when I call the phone an oracle, you can go many other ways with this, but I do think that the phone is a qualitative change, like the bottomlessness of it, right? Like the way that it's not a tool, because it's not directed at doing any particular thing, right? It's rather that there's a bottomlessness of what it might be able to do for you. That's new, right? Like, and the way that instead of allowing you to do things that actually makes you less capable in almost every aspect of life, right? That's new. And so those are two of the changes, like those are two of the mechanisms. And it goes to your question, like in terms of what one could do on a micro scale, like on a political scale, the United States really needs to tax people. That's what the state is there for in the first place. Like, when one talks about the transitions from these kinds of political orders to other kinds of political orders, being able to tax people is pretty close to the top of what that transition means. Keeping screens out of schools, like keeping screens away from children in your own life, keeping screens away from, like, those are the kinds of things one can do, which would actually push us back a little bit.